Hello, welcome to another cruiser inspection in World of Warships. Looking at the Jinan. We just looked at Cerberus, seems fitting to go with the next smoke farmer. And Jinan. I think Jinan's actually pretty damn good. I think it's in a fairly decent spot as of now. I've looked at the NA stats, and it seems to be incredibly underperforming. Like bottom three worst cruisers in the game statistically, win rate wise at least, which is quite interesting to me because the Jinan is well, what is it? It's basically a better version of Smolensk that's harder to play. I think that is probably the easiest way to summarize it. You have better HE DPM because you can take reload, and Smolensk kind of has to take range. So you have better HE DPM, worse AP, but you have better fire starting. You have about the same smoke ability. You have a better hull than Smolensk. And the torps are obviously like pretty much god tier, pretty much like best torps in the game at tier 10 among almost everything in the game. So if people are, and I would say that just comes down to, so why are people performing in Smolensk and not in Jinan? I think that's just down to the shell arcs require a bit of hands. You actually have to have hands to play this thing. Smolensk has very, very, very hand-holdy shell arcs compared to a ship like Jinan. So despite Jinan having better damage output, fire starting, and very good torpedoes, and a better hull, more survivable hull overall compared to Smolensk, the shell flight time is very, very bad compared to something like Smolensk. But assuming your aim with floaty shells is decent, like let's say you were a solid Colbert player, the Jinan actually has a bit better shell arcs than something like a Colbert. Flight time to 15.5 is like 13 something seconds. It's very bad, but it's not the worst. But the fire starting is really quite crazy. You have well over 20 fires per minute in the Jinan. The smoke is decent. It doesn't last for long, but you do get 30 seconds of propagation, so you can give yourself a nice big smoke screen. The AP is pretty much exclusively useful on flat targets at close range, where the HE is not going to pen, but the AP will pen the side plating. You pretty much never use it. And then the hull is quite interesting. Also, it has an improved heal. You get a 50% Citadel repair compared to something like Smolensk that has a typical cruiser heal of 50 pen and 33 Citadel. The Jinan has 50 and 50, so that's also a bit nice. And then you do have this exposed Citadel belt of about, I want to say it's 96, 97, but you have this fairly large strip of 32 that kind of runs from the high turret. It kind of runs from this section of the ship. So as long as you're not up against Yamato, Shiki, Satsuma, and Incomp, you can kind of get away with a ton of bullshit in this boat. You can get away with a lot more aggressive bullshit plays in the Jinan. So just like with Austin, the hull is identical to Austin. You can get away with a lot of real horseshit gameplay compared to other cruisers because the amount of nose that is overmatchable is just way less than a lot of these other ultralights. Like something like Minotaur or Smolensk, for example. They basically get nuked at every angle by anything that overmatches 16. And that is not really true of the Jinan. They can get a bit of luck and get a bunch of ass pens or something on you, but it's not that extreme. You can actually play a bit aggressively in the Jinan because you're very unlikely to just get one shot at every angle. So that's also kind of something that makes it a bit more interesting than some of these other spammers is if you can stay remotely healthy and then push in, the torps are undeniably the scariest torps in the game. Deep waters, of course, Wargaming claims you have something like a 4-second reaction time, but we all know how spotting works in this game. Realistically, you can take 2 to 3 full seconds off reaction time for all torpedoes in the game. There's a lot of situations where if ships don't have hydro, these torps just basically pop up out of literal nowhere and give you 2 to 3 seconds max. The Stalingrad radar came in incredibly clutch, and you can see here the kind of DPM you get on destroyers is quite disgusting. Just like 5k a salvo, and the salvos are coming every 2.5 seconds. So there's absolutely nothing wrong with the damage output of the Jinan. here. The lack of hands maybe on full display. But you see how much of that torp damage was healable, which is quite nice. So you do have a very tiny HP pool, right? 37.5 or 35.7, and this is with I think it's the Daorong captain that gives you 500 extra HP. So yeah, you have an incredibly non-existent HP pool, but the improved Citadel heal does help you a bit when you bot out and hit a torp like that, or maybe you take a Citadel. Um, but really, the selling point on Jinan, I mean, the torps are undeniably excellent. Don't get me wrong, but if you can get used to these shell arcs, the damage output with the HE is like kind of disgusting. I mean, it's about 400,000 HE DPM since you're going to be running reload mod always. And then it's like 22, 23 fires per minute. Probably even more with the build I'm running. I'm probably somewhere around 24 or even 25 fires per minute in this thing, which is quite disgusting. You get 4 of these smokes. It's not a ton of time spent in smoke because start to finish, the smoke screen is only about 100 seconds, which is not like great, but yeah, it's just the fire starting is crazy. And here, I mean, I'm at 26,000 HP. I'm radar by the Salem. He's backing up. He's on this rock, but like the Salem doesn't overmatch me. So as long as I don't give him multiple AP salvos at a 15, 20 degree or better angle for him, he's going to take multiple salvos to kill me, and I only need to really live one salvo when I turn out in torp. The torp angles are quite good. That's another thing that makes the Jinan torp so good in a drive-by brawl situation, is just how good the forward firing angles are. I mean, I want to say they're maybe like 30 degrees. So here, he got one Citadel, but then a bunch of ricochets, and now I'm like kind of perfectly nose in, so he doesn't really do much damage. And he's going to hit one decent salvo on me. There you go. Some overpens, and I can just literally outturn his guns, and he's dead. And this is what Jinan has going for it. It has a lot of different things going for it, and that to me makes it a lot less boring than some of these other ultralight cruisers. It's kind of a combination of you can smoke farm and start tons of fires. You can, but then you can also like put out this crazy like 20 torps every 2 minutes, and then you have the reload booster to make it 40 every 4 minutes. So like you're kind of averaging 30 torps if you're just kind of spinning to win gameplay. You're pretty much putting out like over the course of a game, assuming let's say your flank evaporated and you have to just kite and spam torps, right? You're kind of putting out like 30 torps every 2 minutes, which is crazy. They have no reaction time. Yeah, they can't hit destroyers, but there's just no reaction time on these torps. They have a very high flood chance. They're kind of crazy. But the thing that I find interesting about the Jinan is I kind of see this community view it as like only worth playing for the torps, even so far as seeing people recommend like building for the torps. And I just feel like that's kind of crazy. Like this thing's guns are honestly no joke. I mean, I understand you don't have the pen, but like at the end of the day, you have better damage output than Smolensk with just harder shells to hit. Like undeniably, Smolensk has higher effective DPM because it's just handholdy shell arcs. But I mean, just statistically, you do have better damage output than Smolensk with the HE, right? And then these torps let you brawl. But I mean, I would go so far as to say like if you took the torp reload booster off of this thing, or kept the torp reload booster and just gave it one torp per side, one set of torps per side, like still be a pretty damn good cruiser, man. I don't think there's anything wrong with the Jinan. It's kind of also inherently less susceptible to the battleship power creep because like you can start a ton of fires. So you're not remotely as out of the fight against like let's say super battleships, right? Because you can start mad fires on them for a ton of damage. You're less susceptible to CVs in your game because your AA is unironically like deterrence level AA now. You get just total piled on by subs. This thing against subs is an actual fucking disaster. Just an absolute fucking disaster if a sub is in your lobby. For the obvious reason that you have 0 sub tools. You have literally nothing, no pity fuck of any kind going for you. You get nothing. You lose, sir. Right? You don't have hydro of any kind. You don't have sub surveillance, and you don't get airstrike planes. It's actually a fucking turbo disaster in the Jinan. Does it suffer the worst in the entire game against subs of any ship in the game? It really might. It really legitimately might be up there, because I can't think of another cruiser that doesn't get hydro or planes. Correct me if I'm wrong. In tier 10, is there a cruiser with no hydro or planes against subs? I honestly do not think that there is. And this is just going to lead us into another delightful, calm and collected cruiser balancing discussion. I would ask you, is it necessary for this thing to start 20-something fires per minute? And yet this comes at the cost of getting fucked by subs? Because, like, this is Wargaming's brain, right? Wargaming is retarded, okay? They don't understand what they're doing with their game. We all know this. But, like, why are there classes that just literally cannot do anything against other classes, but have this ability to turbo fuck other classes? Like, this ship is unbelievably toxic against a battleship with no hydro. This is like nightmare fucking fuel, the Jinan is. So, you know, this sub would be in basically airstrike range if we were in any other cruiser. But he's not, because we're in a Jinan, so we don't get planes. We also don't get a hydro to dodge torps with. Now, fortunately, what's going to happen is this submarine player is going to be the kind of submarine player that is usually on your team, right? This is typically the sub player that's on my team, and I have to play with, not against. But he's basically just going to completely kill himself for literally no reason very soon, which is going to be very cash money as fuck for us. But, you know, Wargaming clearly thinks that having 0 ability to fight subs is like a balancing feature of ships, right? Because we still have premium battleships in the game with like no ASW plane range, right? It took them forever to buff like even Ohio ASW plane range, right? We have ships like Minotaur that don't get ASW planes, but ships like Brisbane, of course, like I said in those reviews, being a bit worse in randoms than Minotaur. So clearly Wargaming in their mind is saying this ship would be too strong if we gave it anti-sub utility. So we're going to nerf the boat by letting sub shit on it, right? Like, clearly that is something that they are trying to do. That is clearly their intent in not giving a ship like Jinan a shitty hydro, right? Like, there's no reason this thing as a smoke cruiser, like, what other smoke cruiser doesn't get a hydro? Smoke farming, right? We're not counting Venezia, okay? What other smoke up HE spamming cruiser doesn't get hydro? Well, none of them, right? So, like, I would understand that you wouldn't want to give this thing a good hydro, but, you know, why does the Jinan not get, like, the Lucian, you know, the improved hydro, like the 5/5 hydro? It'd be a very interesting thing to experiment with. And then you could tone down the torps and you could tone down the fire starting, right? Like, it'd be very, very interesting, because the hull profile and the torps and everything kind of lend the Jinan to pushing and the good DPM. Like, if you had a 5 or a 5/5 kilometer hydro on the Jinan, you would all of a sudden be like very empowered to aggressively contest caps, which I kind of, as you notice, I already do that, but I think it would be super interesting. You could give it like a 5/5 hydro, and then just tone down the fire chance, because I do think the fire chance is overtuned on this thing. I think it's a bit much, I really do. But then it has no ability to fight subs, and it doesn't, you know, you have okay maneuverability, but you don't have any kind of like improved acceleration in this thing. So when you smoke up, you're very susceptible to torps. You don't really have any torp protection, and because your HP pool is so low, like, Shima torps basically two-shot you in this thing. You take 2 Shima torps midship, and it's GG Reds. Like, the game is literally over. So I think it would be quite an interesting thing to give this and that's kind of also like a feature of the Pan-Asian destroyer line, right? Like, it gets the torps and the reload booster, but it doesn't get either the radar of the tech line or or, you know, the Hydro, and I think that'd be like super interesting. You know, we're coming out with Svea, right? We have Plymouth, we have other ships with Smoke and Hydro. Wargame is coming out with Svea, which is like looks to be pretty much pure cancer to play against as a destroyer. Give this thing the Yu Yang radar. Give this thing the 7.5 radar, right? It's nowhere near stealth radar, right? Nowhere near stealth radar, but by utilizing controlled aggression and game sense and high skill, you can maneuver into situations to push in and radar destroyers in this thing. You could tone down the fire chance, tone down the torps. Like, there's so many interesting things you could do to make the Jinan way more interesting and make it more than just a smoke farmer. But of course, I mean, Wargaming will never do that. You know, so it's just a ship that farms some smoke. That's how most people play it. They never open water. They never take any risk in it, which I think, like I said with Cerberus, is a mistake. You're just a little bit more empowered in this thing to take open water risks. Same with Austin. The hulls are the same, right? Yeah, if there's no 460 overmatch and there's no battleship crossfire, right? Like, if this Montana and this Bungo had shots on me, I probably would not open water. If this Bungo was in a Yamato, a Satsuma, I probably would not open water, because then everything would, like, kind of Citadel me, have a good chance, right? But when you have, like, a remotely controlled situation, there's no reason to not, you know, take a little heat off of your team, because at the end of the day, you are an ultralight cruiser. The enemy team loves to shoot ultralight cruisers, but you're quite small, you're decently maneuverable, and then you do have this 32 millimeter side plating, which lets you balance a lot of even, you know, the 30 mil overmatch ships. So yeah, I do think it's just kind of a shame that cruisers on design kind of goes into the, like, easier to play if you're bad category, but not remotely as good if you're good. And I do think that Jinan is a higher skill ship than most of these smoke farmers. Like, definitely it's higher skill than Smolensk, Cerberus, right? Just because of the shell arcs. The shell arcs are, you know, undeniably, I mean, you see, look at this lead time, right? Like I said, they're not quite as bad as something like Colbert, but they're undeniably challenging to use beyond, let's say, like 12, 13, like 13 kilometer range is kind of the range where the Jinan shell arcs become, like, noticeably challenging to hit on anyone with hands, especially. But just like the raw DPM, the raw fire starting is absolutely excellent. I do think that like I said, with all those examples, some interesting things could be done to the ship to give it kind of a more unique identity, more in line with the Pan-Asian identity. Because as of right now, the Jinan, at least from the enemy perspective, feels like a very weird dynamic of you either shit on it or it shits on you for free, if that makes sense. Like, if you're in a, you know, like a sub, you shit on this for free, right? If you're in a battleship with 460s, you shit on this for free. If you're a battleship with a Hydro, this thing is a non-issue. If you're a battleship with any kind of improved healing to counter the fire damage, it's a non-issue. But then, like, we have certain other ships, like, let's say you're in a battleship with no Hydro, a big superstructure. If you're in a Montana, and pushing into this thing is just pure cancer. One of the highest cancer ships in the game to push into in something like a Montana. Then let's say you're in a cruiser with, like, no real improved, no overmatch on this thing, and it can just, like, run you down for free. Like you saw in that first video, or first replay against the Salem, like, that guy literally is dead 100 out of 100 times. I mean, he is. The outcome is certain. I don't care how good of a player he is. I just push perfectly nose into him. He's going to HE me for, like, 4K 3 or 4 times. I'm going to turn out. He's maybe going to get a really good, like, triple Citadel salvo on me for 15K, and then he's dead to torps, right? Like, there just isn't a universe where he can fight me. And I think that is kind of the issue that I think is happening with a lot of these cruisers. I think this is very, very, very true with a ship like Castilla being a newer cruiser. There are ships where the Castilla is a giant punching bag. It has no chance against, like, anything with 30 overmatch, just eats it alive. Like Castilla playing against a Bungo is actually hilarious. You basically exist to give that Bungo player MVP for the game. But then the Castilla against like a Minotaur, for example, or like a Jinan or something like that, it can overmatch, is absurd. Like absolutely absurd how hard it shits on ultralight cruisers, right? Cruiser players who make a single mistake, instead of losing a third to half of their boat, they just get one shot by it, right? And that is kind of I don't know. I mean, maybe this is just some random rant that nobody agrees with, but it just doesn't feel like. I feel like we used to have design where with high skill you could kind of make any ship work against other ships. Now, if you were up against a really competent player, maybe not, right? Like if you were in a Hindenburg if you're in a Hindenburg against a really, really high skill Montana player who can target your bow, who doesn't let you just torp the fuck out of him, who doesn't let you AP him for 15k a chunk, right? Then yeah, you probably still lose that, right? It's a battleship, you're a cruiser at the end of the day, right? But if you're a good Hindenburg player against like an even average Montana player, you can make it work, right? You can absolutely make that work. And I feel like we kind of had that, like Des Moines. A good Des Moines against an average Montana, Des Moines would probably win because he's going to dodge, he's not going to take bow hits, he's not going to go flat. The Montana maybe doesn't perfectly aim nose, and, you know, Des Moines got a lot of DPM, right? And now I feel like it's just, we've got these cruisers, and it's like, I don't care how good of a player you are, if you are pushing into the Jinan and you have no, if you're in a Montana and you have to push into this thing, it's like, what do you, like, realistically, what do you do? Like, it sends 10 torps at you, you guaranteed hit one, because there's 0 reaction time, and you get flooded, so you have to, like, damage con, and then he spins, and 20 seconds later sends 10 more and floods you, and then he reload boosts, and 10 seconds later sends 10 torps, and 10 seconds later sends 10 torps, and it's just like, you don't have any ability to do anything about that. But then let's say you're a Jinan against like a Stalingrad who has 12 km radar and overmatches your whole boat. Well, like now you have no ability to live against that thing, right? Unless you have spotting and you can stay really far away. So I don't know. As a smoke cruiser, you're always, you know, slightly at least susceptible to bad teammates in this thing. I'm not going to deny it. But I do think it's kind of inherently more interesting than a lot of these other cruisers, especially newer cruisers. Like, why would you ever play a Yoda when you could play Jinan, right? Like, I think we just looked at Cerberus. I think Jinan is more interesting than Cerberus. I do think Cerberus is probably like overall a bit easier to play. Definitely easier to play than Jinan, but I do think Jinan's a bit more dynamic, a bit more interesting with the torps, with the armor that lets you kind of brawl a bit. With the DPM, like it does have like double Cerberus DPM. Obviously, it doesn't have the shell arcs, the range, or the, you know, penetration. I'm not saying that, but it is a bit more interesting. Sub MVP because he like accidentally spotted 3 things and hit 5 torps. Pretty cool. Yeah, I think this is one of those kind of interesting ships that people maybe don't give as much credit as they should. I don't think there's any reason this ship should be performing like bottom 3 in NA. I do think that's kind of crazy. I was very surprised when I looked that up. I thought for sure there would be ships like significantly underperforming compared to the Jinan. Yeah, I do. I don't know. I'm trying to remember what the ships are. I think I can pull it up real quick as far as win rate wise, but Jinan is like very, very close to the bottom. Actually, it really is the bottom because the only ships that perform worse are Yoshino B and Zhao Color. I don't think those really count. You know, this thing is performing bottom of the barrel. But then again, though, I mean, we've got we've got Hindenburg performing near the bottom of the barrel too, and I find that insane. Salem doesn't perform well. Even like Des Moines on NA doesn't perform well, right? Crazy. A lot of this is like selection bias too. When you have to keep this in mind, like when you are looking at performance on the server, you do have to take it with a bit of a grain of salt because there are certain ships that are just kind of only played by good players, right? Like ships that are smoke farmers are going to be played by everybody because they're inherently maybe a bit more forgiving and slightly easier to play overall. Um, and then some ships are played by the entire player base. Like Hindenburg's very old, so it kind of makes sense there a bit. But you do have to take it with a grain of salt because, like, if you look on the NA server, the Gibraltar is one of the best performing cruisers, and that has nothing to do with how good it is. Like, kind of objectively by every metric, right? The Gibraltar is one of the worst cruisers at tier 10 in the entire game. It's kind of pure dog shit, but it's also only really played by very good players for the most part. Like, you do not really see mediocre players in Gibraltar. You tend to see much better than average players in it, right? Same thing with like Sevastopol, which is one of the worst cruisers in the game, but is played by a bit above average players. So you do have to take that with a bit of a grain of salt that the Jinan is the worst performing cruiser on NA because it is probably going to be played by idiots who just play it to spam torps and smoke farm, right? But I do think that what I would like to see overall, we'll go back to the port and go over the spec, but overall, to sum that up, I would like to see the ship get some more aggressive tools like a hydro, ASW planes, or even like the Yu-Yang's really short-range radar would be quite interesting. And then we could tone down like the toxicity of the fire chance, right? And maybe even tone down the torp count. All right, the rambling, the yapping has ended for a brief moment. We can look at equipment. I think this is all totally standard. I mean, I'm running the pure cope that is DFAA, mod. Just getting it back a little. The AA is really good, but there's kind of two thought processes. One is building for torps and guns. I think guns is like objectively the correct decision because you have so much torp damage output. You also don't really want range because of the arcs. 15.5 is very usable on this thing, but yeah, I have built the Jinan for torps, like fully for torps equipment and captain. And if you want to buff the torps at all, really all I would say is take damage on the captain. I don't think any of the rest, like, there's really no value to taking speed because one of two things is going to happen when you torp someone in the Jinan, the Yu Yang, these deep water torp ships. They either have hydro and they have like 30 seconds to react, or they don't have hydro and they have 3 seconds to react, right? So giving them like 2.8 seconds to react instead of 3 seconds to react by buffing the speed on the torps is like pure copium madness. And then, you could take torp reload, but then you do get torp in caps a lot. There is some modifier going on, in my opinion, with Yu Yang and Jinan, like the Pan Asian torps. They lose torpedo tubes unlike any other type of ship I've ever played. Like I have a decent amount of games in Jinan, a decent amount in Yu Yang, and a decent amount in Shima. I can like literally count on one hand the amount of times I've perma lost torp tubes in Shima, and Jinan and Yu Yang feel like they lose a torp tube perma like every 4 or 5 games. I don't know what's going on with that, but that is also something to keep in mind. Like on Yu Yang, even with a full torp build, I do not take this because the torps break like fucking crazy. I don't know what's going on. It's mad. I mean, you don't really have a choice on any of these. Captain spec wise, I do run Da Rong instead of, who is it, Zhao Jingbeng? Yeah. And there's really two reasons for that. Number one, you don't really get the talent benefit from Zhenbeng because you're never really going to get combat scout, so that ability is kind of out the window. And then while the torp skill is nice, the amount of games you hit, I think it's 6 torps you need, is like maybe 1 in 10 in the Jinan. It doesn't really happen that much. And then, crucially, this captain gives you 2 incredibly valuable skills on Jinan. The improved demo expert is amazing. Because the base fire chance is only like maybe 10%, or maybe even 9% because we're running both of these flags. Yeah, so it's a 9% fire chance base. So by buffing it by 1.5%, you have to remember that Demo Expert is a flat buff, and then you have to calculate the variable, or sorry, the relative buff. So buffing 9% fire chance up to 10.5 with this skill is like kind of crazy, because that is like a 16.7% increase to your fires per minute. So like this thing already has almost 20 fires per minute base. Buffing that by 17% is fucking insane. And then you have no HP. So getting an extra, yeah, it's only 500 HP, but like it kind of, every little bit helps, obviously, right? So I think these two skills are just like kind of way better than the talents that you basically never get on the Coal Captain. Just my kind of 2 cents on that. Um, and then this is kind of the build. I think this is the objectively correct build. These skills I'm hovering over right now. Um, the Last Stand, you have no use for Gun Feeder, no use for Turret. You don't really have any use for a top skill, but you do want Last Stand. So you take Last Stand, Fire Chance. You definitely want Heavy HE. It's a flat 10% buff at no cost because your gun caliber is low. AR, you absolutely want Superintendent. You need that 4th smoke. You need that 4th heal if you take any damage. Concealment and survivability. So you basically are locked in to 19 points. This is your 19-point lock-in. That gives you 2 extra points. Now, you can grab either Torp Reload. I think that's totally valid on this thing. Totally valid. Or, like, I like Incoming Fire Alert quite a lot on this thing, because a consistent way of dodging damage is angling in and catching things on the belt. We'll look at that in a second. So I like Incoming Fire Alert on this thing, but I think you can make a very strong case that Consumable Specialist is way better on Jinan. I think if I had to overall recommend what's maybe optimal, because I don't really think Torp Speed has almost any value, I would probably overall recommend these 19 points, and then with your final 2, either taking Fill the Tubes or taking Incoming Fire and Consumable Specialist. I would probably go with that overall, or I would build into the AA. The problem with building into the AA is you have to give up a very useful skill to do that. That's kind of the issue that I have with going full AA, because something like the Austin, and this is kind of an Austin clone with just different shell, you know what I mean, different shells, etc., but the hull is the same. The reason why Austin can run a full AA spec is because Austin has much less value for having Superintendent, because you get 5 heal spec, right? So unfortunately, Jinan only gets 3 heal specs. So if Jinan had 4 heals base, then I would probably go, and 4 smokes, I would probably recommend the AA build, but giving up Superintendent or Survivability is pure madness, and then giving up 10% free DPM is also kind of crazy to me. So I can't really recommend AA build on Jinan, even though the AA is quite excellent, and it is worth building into from the standpoint of the AA is good. But yeah, you have to give up a 3-point skill that is pure crucial to have. So yeah, I think that's the build I would overall recommend. Armor-wise, it's identical to Austin. We'll look at it again, though. There's not that much to overmatch by battleships without 460s when you're at close range. Now at long range, your deck is made out of paper, right? Long range is a totally different story, and you can like 100% just get like turbo nuked at long range. Especially, again, this is why 460s really fuck you. It's not just that it ignores your bullshit side plating, right? It's that the deck on the Citadel is 32, right? Deck on the Citadel, so like any range, any angle, 460s blow you the fuck up in this thing. You got to be very careful about battleships that overmatch 32. But yeah, close range, there's not much to shoot at. We talked about this in the Austin video, but I'm going to pull this away and put it back multiple times. That's the Citadel, right? And this is the 32. So when you're at this angle, this is auto bounce, right? This is like low 22 degree angle against basically all tier 10 battleship AP that's below 460 millimeter caliber. You auto bounce on the belt, you auto bounce on the citadel, you get overpenned on the ass, and then there's like a fraction of a chance to, you have like this little thing right here where you can maybe arm, and then the tip is an overpen. So you basically take nothing but overpens and ricochets at close range against battleships with below 460 millimeter guns. Uh, that's why it's a little bit tankier than a lot of these ultralights at close range against certain guns. That's why I would just love to see this thing get a offensive tool. I would love to see this thing with a Yu Yang radar or a Lucian Hydro, and then tone down the fire chance and maybe even the torps. I would think it would be super interesting. They'll never do it though. That is going to do it for the Jinan. I think that's basically. Oh, we've got to look at Marseille. I think that's the last tech tree cruiser I have to look at. So I guess we'll look at Marseille, and then we'll move on to a couple of maybe the. I guess we'll look at some research bureau ships, and then we'll start looking at some destroyers. We'll see you in the next one. Thank you for watching.